Alright, let's talk distance formula. So if you see this plot, this graph here, I have AC and CB graphs. And if you'll notice, I can draw a line from A to B to create a right triangle, and if you will recall, the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where the legs of the triangle are labeled A and B. This one could be B and this one could be A, that's fine. But the hypotenuse is always labeled C. So, if I were to plug in my values to find from A to B, or my hypotenuse C, I would just find the distance of A, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is nice and easy to calculate because it's just a horizontal line. And then I plug in B, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a 6, not a B. Equals C squared, so I get 64 plus 36 equals C squared, 100. And the way we undo squaring is by taking the square root of both sides. Therefore, we get that our hypotenuse is 10. Alright, well, let's pretend, for instance, that I don't know what these coordinates are. So I'm just going to label them as x, y, and I'm going to label this one as well as x, y. But the way that I need to distinguish between the 2 points is I'm going to label this as the first x and the first y. This one I'm going to label as the second x and the second y. So if I were to plug this in, I would still be working with a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I'm looking for c, so I need to get that alone. Okay? Well, the way that I do that would just be to take the square root of both sides. So if I were to square root c squared, that would leave me with c alone. And I'd have the square root of a squared plus b squared. Here's the thing though. Let's pretend, for our sake, that we don't know what these two legs are. We don't know what their lengths are. So the way that we would do that would, if we call this A again and this B, the way that I find that is by finding the distance between these two. So in this case, I'm going to rewrite A as, distance is always positive, so I'm going to use absolute value. The distance between my x values, right, because we're talking about horizontal right now, so x1 minus x2, okay? Well, then I have my b, and I need to find my distance here. So I'm going to take my y1 and subtract my y2. And again, distance is always positive, so I'm going to leave in that absolute value. So then when I plug that in here, I get that x1 minus x2 squared plus y1 plus y2 squared. Now, the reason I didn't write the absolute value in here is when you square a number, you will always get a positive number. So a positive number times a positive number is going to be positive, and a negative number times a negative number is still a positive number. So I don't need to necessarily include that absolute value in here because that squaring takes care of that. Alright, here's a nice, pretty written out distance formula, and this is if we're given the 2 points that we're working with. Alright, now let's talk about midpoint formula. So I want you to think of midpoint formula as kind of like an average, okay? Well, the way we find an average is by adding up a bunch of things and then dividing by whatever that number of things that we had was. So, let's say we want to find the midpoint of A to C. Well, that one's pretty easy, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spots. So I know that I can just go 4 over and cut it in half. That way this piece is equal to this piece, and I found my midpoint. That's because that was a horizontal line. Here we have a vertical line, and we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots away, so I can just take 3 spots from each side and cut it in half. Super easy. However, when you have a diagonal line, it's not so easy, right? You can't just count because how long is that box? And then this one's real tiny, and then this one's bigger and tiny. So we have to write it like an average, okay? So again, I'm going to label these as x1, y1, and I've got x2 and y2 here, okay? I need to find the midpoint, so I'm trying to find, equally spaced between A and B, which means I need to find the average of my x values, so I'm going to add my two x values together, and I'm going to add my two y values together. However, to find an average, I would need to divide by the number of points I'm working with. In this case, it's 2. So, ta-da! This is how you get your midpoint. Alright, so if I were to actually use numbers, I would have my first x, and I'm trying to find the average of the distances, so I add my second x, and then I'm dividing by 2 because I'm using 2 points. And then I use my first y, and then I can either add -4, or if you can see it as 2 minus 4, that's fine with me too. So then we have -3 plus 5, which gives me 2, and then I'm dividing by that 2, so that'll give me a 1. And then I've got 2 plus -4, which will give me a -2, and then I have divided by 2, and I get -1. Well, if I go ahead and plot that, so if I go to 1, -1, that looks like I've pretty much cut this segment in half, right? So I have successfully found the midpoint. And here is your nice, pretty midpoint formula written out. And that's assuming that we're given the 2 points.